Okay, I'm going to do a test. Before I get started, I'm going to let Tyler send me a text or somebody that has my phone number. Let me know if I'm coming across live. Testing, testing. Okay. Let's do this again. Okay, let's take this from the top. Shabbat Shalom and welcome to United Israel World Union. This is our Sabbath morning scripture study coming to you live from St. Francisville, Louisiana. Thank you very much for joining us. You know what I was saying when you couldn't hear me was that I was a bit gun-shy over the technological problems that we had last week, and I just said, please God, let us not have any, and I start getting texts that we're having them. So anyway, we're good to go now. Thank you for letting me know that we were having some difficulties, and we are back. So hopefully everyone finds us. I wanted to start off this morning and give a couple of announcements, if I can do that. The first announcement that I wanted to give is that I do have a new publication out. Now, the reason I'm sharing this on Shabbat, you can purchase this after Shabbat, but I just wanted, while I have everyone together, to let you know that this is now available on Amazon worldwide. You see the beautiful orange cover that was designed by our good friend Daniel Wright. It's called These Are the Words, Essential Biblical Hebrew Vocabularies. And within this book, this is a mock-up, by the way, but it shows you the exact size. It's 4 by 8. You can put it in your pocket, in your purse, in your bag or whatever, and carry with you the 1,000 most common words in the Hebrew Bible. And they're listed according to frequency and so forth. So I encourage you, if you want to master and memorize the 1,000 most common words in the Hebrew Bible, this book gives it to you. You carry it with you, you learn those words. And with this, I also want to let people know that in the very near future, now I have 3 tours to Israel back-to-back from October 20th until about Thanksgiving, but very soon following on the heels of that, we're going to kick off some biblical Hebrew classes, basics of biblical Hebrew. How do you read the words? And so anyone who's interested in that, I encourage you to look on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, we have a group that's called Introduction to Biblical Hebrew. Sign up for the group. I think I've got it locked down to private, but if you put your name in there, I will approve you, and we'll use that. I intend to stream classes to that group page and help people learn to read biblical Hebrew. And then you have the 1,000 most popular words in this book, so you're off to the races, as we say. So anyway, I got that out of the way, but I did want you to know about it while I have you all here, and I encourage you to get that. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are in our journey through the Pentateuch. We're in the 5th book. We're in Deuteronomy, Devarim. These are the words. We're told by the narrator at the beginning of the book that Moses spoke these words. Now, last week's class, I think this was something that I started talking about earlier before the audio issue that I had. But last week's class was a bit challenging. I can tell you that people responded to it in 2 ways. One, that's too much. I'm out. I got a little bit of that. And I'm sad to say that because I understand, but I want people to stay and challenge, stay and study. And but the other group, the majority, almost without exception, said that was incredibly refreshing because we're going strictly by the text here. We're going to the text, we're pointing out what the text says. But last week's class was titled Not the Ideal, Sacrifice the temple, and the monarchy. And those three things I put forward in last week's class, as the title suggests, are not the ideal. They're things that God never wanted, never desired, and Scripture backs me up on it. The book of Deuteronomy begins, "These are the words which Moses spoke." Ele hadevarim. These are the words which Moses spoke. And I do believe that within Deuteronomy, we do have some of the words that Moses spoke, but not all of the book reflects Moses' words. Moses with an apostrophe, Moses' words. It also contains the words of a narrator. It contains editorial comments, but you know that from following these classes. Now, the reason that it's important for me to be honest and upright and tell you the way that the Scriptures say it is because I can see no greater thing than to identify words that we can actually attribute to Moses. Now, remember, academia, for the most part, doubts that Moses even existed. And if he existed, they would say, it's very difficult to believe that he was literate. So you have all these stacks of minimalism that are added to one another. But I suggest that within the book of Deuteronomy, we have elements that can be traced back to Moses, and I think it's very important. It should be obvious to everyone why it's important to discern those words which are Moses's. It's also important, at least as important, to identify words which are not Moses's, because that's what we're looking for. We're looking to discern who is the speaker in this particular text. It helps us weight things. It helps us to decide what is the importance of this. Now, in particular, one of the main reasons that I think it is so essential to discern between those which are Moses's and those which are not is that we do have in Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 2. In fact, I want you to go there this morning, first thing. Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 2. And it says the following, if you don't know it by heart. It says, "You shall not add anything to what I command you or take anything away from it, but keep the commandments of the Lord your God that I enjoin upon you." I'm reading from the JPS. So if we have a text in Deuteronomy chapter 4, in the first person, by the way, apparently something that Moses wrote, it is a caution, it is a warning. Don't add to, don't take away from. Now, why is that? Well, it should be obvious, but let's keep reading. Let's go back up where it says that you shall guard, where it says, but keep the commandments. In Hebrew, the root word is shamar, guard the commandments. In other words, to guard the commandment means to protect it from additions and deletions. Now, if that has happened, we ought to be aware of it. Go with me to Deuteronomy chapter 13. Deuteronomy chapter 13 and verse 1. It says, "Be careful to observe only that which I enjoin upon you, neither add to it nor take away from it." Interesting that the book of Deuteronomy is the only book in the Pentateuch which has the warning not to add to or take away from. And I believe that that is for a very specific reason. I've stressed often in the past couple of years as we've worked through this current study that we're on, where we're doing a deep dive into the Pentateuch text, that it is something which you can see yourself if you take the time, that the book of Exodus, the book of Leviticus, and the book of Numbers are in their entirety presented in the third person. Moses is mentioned more than 800 times in the Pentateuch, and those all indicate one thing consistently, that someone other than Moses wrote those things. Who is it? We don't know. But Deuteronomy also has some third-person narration. However, within the book of Deuteronomy, we do have traces of and examples of first-person narration. Now, the question that I have, and that I hope you join me in asking, could this first-person material provide us some method whereby we can begin to determine what was and is authentically Moses? It's a good way to start, I believe. Now, something that I've noticed over the past few years as I study is that in this first-person material, often the material that's written in the first person, all of which is in Deuteronomy, and material which is written in the third person, which is in the other books, primarily Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, at times, and I show this as often, when you put the first person account side by side with a third person account, you notice that they don't contain the same information. Now, I'm going to put forward to you today that that is for this reason and this reason primarily. There are things, events, details that only Moses would know. And it's interesting that where we diverge between the two accounts, the first and the third, it is so far, and I'm working through this day by day. I'm continually working on the entire life and laws of Moses. That's a hint that there could be a book coming forward in that name. Let's see, what would I call it? How about tentatively, let's call it a harmony of the life and laws of Moses. That is really a good idea. And you put these stories side by side and you look at them, and what I keep finding consistently is where they tend to diverge, the first person and third person, is when something in the first person account, when I read it, I go, there's no way the other writer would know this. You'll see an example of that today, I promise you. Deuteronomy is different. Now, one example that I'm going to cover today is the narration that leads up to the giving of the 10 words. We're not going to cover the 10 words. We've done that in plenty of classes. And the narration that deals with that which follows the giving of the 10 words at Horeb. So I'm going to take that watershed event, the giving of the 10 words at Horeb on the day of assembly from the midst of the fire. Jehovah speaks forward his 10 words. I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens before that and a little bit about what happens after that. And we're going to look at accounts, first person account, third person accounts, and we're going to discern that there is something quite interesting here. It's a secret. It's a secret because Moses only could know what I'm going to talk about today. Only Moses. Someone else couldn't have known it, and that's why it's in a first-person narration. I hope I have you hooked. Now, the first thing I'll tell you is, and you know this, but just to lay down the foundation, this event that I'm talking about, the greatest event in all of human history, is told in two places, the book of Exodus and the book of Deuteronomy. Those are the two places that we get this story. Now, what most people believe, it's generally accepted that the account of this event in Exodus reflects or represents the narration that is closest to the event. And therefore, people tend to go to that one. You know, Exodus in your Bible comes before Deuteronomy, so people assume then that Exodus is telling the story as it happens. Deuteronomy is after, so Deuteronomy is a reflecting back on the events that took place in the book of Exodus. Now, I have no problem with understanding that the chronological layout suggests that the event as described in Exodus is presented as the giving of the 10 words, and the Deuteronomy version is represented as reflecting back on it. Indeed, that is the case. It seems clear that Deuteronomy is reflecting back on the giving of the 10 words. What I'm asking today is it as clear as we think that Exodus's account is closer to the event? In other words, is the narration in Exodus earlier than the book of Deuteronomy's account? So here's the way a lot of people think about these texts, that as they're going through the desert, Moses is writing down, and the Lord spoke and said this, and then we gathered up at the mountain, and there was all this. We're going to talk about this. That's why I can brush over it quickly. And then he's writing it all down, and then he keeps that in his diary, and then 40 years later nearly, he's giving it again. All right? That's the way people look at it. But today we're going to look at the details in these two accounts, and we're going to focus on something that Deuteronomy gives us in a first-person account that's unknown to us in the Exodus account. And I suggest openly that what that tells me is that the person who wrote the Exodus account of the giving of the 10 words simply didn't know. It's not a criticism. It's not a criticism at all. The person who wrote that could not have known what the first-person account gives us, because the first-person account reflects, in my view, Moses knows, and he's the only one that could know. That's the groundwork for today's class. Thank you for joining us. Now let's get ready to dig into the text. Okay, now I want you to think about this. The encounter at Horeb, per the account in Exodus, so this event that we're talking about in Exodus's version takes place very soon after the children of Israel are liberated from the iron furnace of Pharaoh. Okay? So it's very soon after. We know a date, according to Exodus, when they left. We know a date in Exodus when they arrived at Sinai. And we know a date, roughly, for this watershed event, the giving of the 10 words, Matan Torah, as it's called in Judaism. So I'm going to ask you to go with me back in time to a place called Horeb. And I want you to join me in a crowd of people assembled in camp around what is called Har HaElohim, the mountain of God. We're going to talk about the days leading up to what is identified by Deuteronomy as the day of the assembly. We're going to cover a little bit of that, and then we're going to look at this story, skipping over the actual 10 words, and then we're going to focus, after we look at the days leading up, we're going to focus on the aftermath, or a better way to put that is, the reaction of those assembled, which I want you to be in that crowd too. So put yourself there. This is going to be the reaction, and in this story of the reaction, you're going to get something that only Moses knew about. So we're going to go first this morning, Deuteronomy chapter 4. Deuteronomy chapter 4. I'm going to start there, and I want to read chapter 4 and verse 9, beginning in verse 9. Only take care and keep your soul diligently, lest you forget the things that your eyes have seen, and lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life. Make them known to your children and your children's children, how on the day that you stood before Jehovah your God at Horeb, the Lord said to me, gather the people to me, that I may let them hear my words, so that they may learn to fear me all the days that they live on the earth, and that they may teach their children so. And you came near and stood at the foot of the mountain, while the mountain burned with fire to the heart of heaven, wrapped in darkness, cloud, and gloom. Then the Lord spoke to you. Jehovah spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. You heard the sound of the words, but you saw no form. There was only a voice. And he declared to you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform, that is, the 10 words. And he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. And Jehovah commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and judgments that you might do them in the land that you're going over to possess. Now, therefore, watch yourselves very carefully, since you saw no form on that day that Jehovah spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire. Now I want you to look with me. Go down to chapter 5, Deuteronomy 5, verse 1. Deuteronomy 5, verse 1. Just hitting a couple of high points. Now notice this is third-person narration introducing something significant. And Moses summoned all Israel, and he said to them. So this is another writer telling us, setting up the story. Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, the statutes and the judgments that I speak in your hearing today, and you shall learn them and be guardful to do them. Jehovah our God made a covenant with us in Horeb. Not with our fathers did Jehovah make this covenant, but with us, who are all of us here alive today. Jehovah spoke with you face to face at the mountain out of the midst of the fire, while I stood between Jehovah and you at that time to declare to you the word of Jehovah. You were afraid because of the fire, and you did not go up into the mountain, he said, and then we get the 10 words. So what Moses is doing now, he's recalling that event. He's setting the stage. It's this awe-inspiring, and I would say even more than awe-inspiring, it is a fear-invoking event. And they're all there, and they're scared of the fire. This fire is enveloping the mountain. Moses is between the mountain and the people. And God speaks these words. Now, Exodus gives us details as well that lead up to this. Now, I'm going to use the JPS here because I have in my Bible here, I have some notes, so I want to look at it from here. Go with me to Exodus chapter 19. I'm going to quickly go through this. Now, part of this is a little bit of a detour because I'm also, one of my favorite studies is to determine which Mount Horeb, which Horeb is the real Horeb? Which mountain is the mountain? Is it St. Catherine's? You ever see St. Catherine's? Some of you may have been there. It's a pretty good steep hike, to climb it. People do it. But I want you to listen to the narration because there are clues in these texts that tell us, could that fit what I'm reading here? So I just want to tell you, in the 19th chapter of Exodus, we know that it's in the 3rd month when they arrive. It says, it begins, I'll just set the stage, on the 19:1, Exodus 19:1. On the 3rd new moon, after the Israelites had gone forth from the land of Egypt, on that very day, they entered the wilderness of Sinai. And then you get this series of up and down for Moses. Now, I just find it interesting to follow. So you follow this with me. 80-year-old Moses is going to be hiking up and back and forth. Now watch this, verse 3. And Moses went up to God. So Moses goes up the mountain, all right? And he's given a message in chapter 19, 5 through 6, a beautiful message. Now then, if you will obey me faithfully, guard my covenant, you'll be my segulah, my treasured possession. And he goes on and tells them they're going to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Go tell the children of Israel this, okay? So then, verse 7, Moses goes down. So he went up the mountain, he got this message, he comes down the mountain. Now, he goes and gathers up the elders, summons and tells them what the Lord has commanded. And the people respond in verse 8 and said, whatever the Lord says, we're going to do it. So Moses brought back the people's words to the Lord. He goes back up. All right? Now, we don't get a time scale here, but we know it's only a few days from the time that they arrived in the 3rd month until the Matan Torah, until the event of the giving of the Torah. So he's already made 3 treks, however far that is. And then, so in verse 8, the people agree. Moses goes up and reports the words to the people. Now, verse 10, look at verse 10. And the Lord said to Moses, go down to the people. All right, so he just got up there. Now he's going to go down to the people, and he's going to warn them to stay pure for the next couple of days. Wash your clothes. Make sure you don't have any relations. You can't touch the mountain and so forth. Now, and then it says in verse 14, Moses came down from the mountain, okay? So we've got 4 one-way trips. This is back and forth, up to the top, down to the bottom, up to the top, down to the bottom, up to the top, down to the bottom. Now, actually, I just did too many, but you get the picture. Okay, verse 16. On the 3rd day, as morning dawned, there was thunder and lightning and a dense cloud upon the mountain and a very loud blast of the horn, and all the people who were in the camp trembled. Moses led the people out of the camp toward God, and they took their places at the foot of the mountain. Now, this matches what we read in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is describing this awe-inspiring event. It's just written from a different perspective, a different writer. Moses tells us the same thing in his account. The people are brought to the mountain, and then he's going to station himself, according to Deuteronomy, between the crowd and the fire. All right? Now, Moses led the people out of the camp toward God. They took their place at the foot of the mountain. Now, Mount Sinai was all in smoke, for the Lord had come down upon it in fire. The smoke rose like the smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled violently. The blare of the horn grew louder and louder. As Moses spoke, God answered him in thunder. This is the perspective of the writer here, you see. And the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up, trip 5. Jehovah says to Moses, go down. Go down. Warn the people not to break through to the Lord to gaze, lest many of them perish. The priests also who come near the Lord must stay pure, lest the Lord break out against them. And Moses said, the people can't come up. You warned us, saying, set bounds, and we've done that. So verse 24, so Jehovah says to him, go down and come back together with Aaron. But let not the priest break through. So Moses goes down. That's trip number 7. So this is up, down, up, down. Now the reason I bring that up is not doubting that those trips took place, but saying that if in a short period of time the prophet can negotiate 7 trips up and down, one has to wonder, how big a mountain are we talking about here? Now, you might say, well, you don't know, Ross. He could be, in excellent shape. And that's true. That's true. But does it make sense? In other words, at least next to a question mark, I would write this. Is this a big mountain? Is he hiking St. Catherine's? Just a question, okay? So the idea is that we get clues in the text, and we have to look at that and we have to figure that in. So just like in Deuteronomy, after describing the awe-inspiring scene, Exodus did the same, and then you have the 10 words. So far, if you look at these side by side, which it would be great if you had a book that was called The Harmony of the Life and Laws of Moses, and you had them in your book like that, sort of a commentary like that. And then next thing is we have 2 different accounts of the reaction to this awe-inspiring scene. All right? Exodus gives us a third-person account of how people reacted to what they saw before them. Deuteronomy gives us an account, and it's in the first person. And for the most part, they look the same. We're going to look at that. There are many similar details, but there's one significant thing that the Exodus account does not tell us, because that writer cannot tell us. That writer doesn't know. that Deuteronomy tells us because the Deuteronomy writer does know, and it's something that only a first-person witness would know about. So I want you to look with me. I posted a sheet, and someone can maybe help me post that sheet. I posted it in two places. I don't need someone to upload it on their personal Dropbox. I posted it on United Israel World Union site as a PDF, UnitedIsraelWorldUnion.com. On there, I posted this, so if someone has that link, they can post that. And I also posted it on the Facebook group for United Israel. Now, if you don't have it and someone can't post that for me, don't worry about it because you can follow along in your Bible. But the sheet does this. You might be able to see that I have 3 columns. And in these 3 columns, I've titled this sheet After the Revelation, or the Giving of the 10 Words at Horeb, with a subtitle, The Request of the People According to Exodus and Deuteronomy. So Deuteronomy, what I've done is, in the left-hand column, I have Exodus 20's account. In the middle column, I have Deuteronomy 5's account. And then in the right-hand column, I have Deuteronomy 18. I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. Those of you who might just have found United Israel in this class, this is called horizontal reading, where you take similar accounts presented in different books, or even within the same book, and you put them side by side and you compare and contrast. Deuteronomy 5, look at the middle, top. These words Jehovah spoke unto all your assembly in the mount, out of the midst of the fire, out of the cloud, out of the thick darkness, and with a great voice, and he added no more. I bolded that. I think that's important. And he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone and delivered them unto me. First person account, right? Now, I pulled in Exodus 20 at this point because that's a good lead-in to what follows in Deuteronomy 5. And all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. When the people saw it, they removed and stood far off. That's the classic King James way of saying they got out of Dodge. They backed up. They backed up. I mean, this is awe-inspiring. And remember now, sometimes we don't like to use the word fear because we say, well, I don't know if fear is the right word because it indicates that you're scared. Listen to me. These people were scared. These people were afraid. They're quaking as we would be, right? Both report that this fear seizes the witnesses to this event. Now, Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 23, in the first person, gives us a pretty detailed account. And it came to pass when you heard the voice out of the midst of the darkness, parenthetical statement, for the mountain did burn with fire, that you came near unto me, first person, even all the heads of your tribes and your elders, and you said, behold, the Lord our God hath showed us his glory and his greatness. We've heard his voice out of the midst of the fire. We've seen this day that God does talk with man and he lives. Now therefore, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us if we hear the voice of the Lord our God any more than we will die. For who is there of all flesh that has heard the voice of the living God speaking out of the midst of the fire as we have and lived? And look at this. Go near and hear all that Jehovah our God shall say. Now this is where the accounts begin to have the same information. Look at verse 19 of Exodus 20. And you see they both say, and. Now, chapter 20 of Exodus says, they said to Moses. And the reason that's lacking in the center column here in Deuteronomy 5 is Moses is telling the story. So, if anything, he would say, they said unto me. So stay tuned. But he doesn't even here. He said, and He's quoting them. You go near and hear all that Jehovah our God will say, and you speak to us all that the Lord our God shall speak unto you, and we will hear it, and we will do it. Now the Exodus version is very close to that. Speak you with us, and we'll hear. Now, slight difference there. I'll let you determine what that might mean. Deuteronomy always, I can't say always, but I can almost say always. So let's say almost always list another action verb with hear. You know, whereas other places it might say listen. Deuteronomy typically will say listen and learn and listen and guard, listen and do, listen, learn, guard, do. All of those are always in order, but it's one, generally more than one. So we will hear it and do it. Now, look over to the right-hand column, Deuteronomy 18. I've got to bring this in. Now, this is reflecting back on the event, but I had to put this here because it's building up to something that we're going to follow up with. Deuteronomy 18:15. The Lord your God will raise up unto you a prophet from the midst of you, of your brothers, like unto me. First person. Unto him you shall seek, you shall listen, according to all that you desired of the Lord your God in Horeb in the day of the assembly, saying, now notice in my chart, I've got Exodus and Deuteronomy quoting the same thing. Let me not hear the voice of the Lord my God is the same basically as let not God speak with us. You see that? See how that's correlating? Now, Deuteronomy 18 adds, neither let me see this great fire anymore. Exodus 20, lest we die. Deuteronomy 18, that I die not. Okay? So here's the basic part of it. Moses gets a request from the people after this event. They're scared. They are quaking, and they ask him, let's do something different. You go to God. He's going to tell you, you take that message and you come back and tell us, we don't want to do this anymore. That's a request. Now, a lot of times people think, man, that's horrible that happened. I remember when I was a little boy, I would ask, you know, because I was reading the Bible, and I'd say, why can't we hear the voice of God? You know, I'm sure that my mother would probably say, you probably couldn't handle it, so don't you know. But that's the idea, though. See, you know, we read these stories, we would be as fearful as they are, no matter what we think, I believe, all right? Unless it's a thin, small whisper, which some have claimed to have heard, right? So, all right. Now, after this request, look at Exodus 20, left-hand column, verse 20, and Moses, third person, said unto the people, fear not, for God has come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that you sin not. All right? The whole point of this awe-inspiring event is to keep you in check so that you don't sin. And the people stood far off, and Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was. Okay, you ready? Listen to this. Third person account is on the ground. And the writer tells us what the writer knows. They say this, Moses walked into the darkness. And you go, what happened? Well, I don't know. I wasn't there. No, but I mean, what happened in the darkness? I mean, you said he went in the cloud? Yeah. He went in the thick darkness where God was? Yeah. Well, what happened? I don't know. I wasn't there. Okay. Now, Deuteronomy is going to tell us what happens in the thick darkness. Because only the first person account can pick it up from here. Because the person giving us the third person account isn't with him. And the Lord heard the voice of your words when you spoke unto me. And the Lord said unto me, I've heard the voice of the words of this people which they have spoken unto you, and they have well said all that they have spoken. They've spoken well all that they have spoken. Both of those accounts say that. Now, Moses, knowing what happened there, hears God say, according to the account in Deuteronomy 5, and notice this is not in Exodus. Oh, that there was such a heart in them that they would fear me and keep all my commandment always, that it might be well with them and with their children forever. Deuteronomy 18 tells us that at this time in the thick darkness, God also said, I will raise up for them a prophet from among their brothers like you, and I'll put my words in his mouth, and he'll speak unto them all that I command him. A request of the people in Deuteronomy led to a conveyance of something in that thick darkness with only Moses and Jehovah, according to our text, that established the institution of prophecy as the Bible writers will tell us from henceforth on. From this point on, biblical prophecy tends to be based on this model that is presented in Deuteronomy. And when you really think about it, Deuteronomy is foundational for much of what we have in the biblical text. Centrality of worship, which we talked about, is based in Deuteronomy. The monarchy, based in Deuteronomy. Prophecy, based in Deuteronomy. The Shema, we only get it from Deuteronomy. The love of God, Deuteronomy. On and on and on. When the people said, don't let us hear from God, you go back and you talk to God and you bring the message to us. Per Deuteronomy, God says in the two places this is discussed that what they said was right. That's good. So even though we might think, oh, I wish that God would speak from the heavens again, God says this is a good way to do it. God says he's going to raise up a Navi. Navi is a word for prophet, Navi. A Navi. 18:15, Deuteronomy 18:15, Moses is telling that God said, he's going to raise up a Navi from your brothers like me. This is Moses speaking first person. God's going to raise you up, you right here, you're going to have a prophet like me. Then in Deuteronomy 18:18, God's version of it is, I will raise up a Navi from their brothers like you. Now, what do we know about this prophet that is coming? By the way, this is going to be a part one of a two-part on Navi, on the prophet. Who is the prophet like Moses? All right? He tells us, I will put my words in his mouth, and he will speak all that I command him. So we're going to take a quick look at Navi, which is translated prophet, Navi in the Pentateuch. I'm not going to go outside the Pentateuch at the present moment. We're going to look at Navi as it appears in the Pentateuch. The first place it shows up is in Genesis chapter 20. Genesis 20, verse 7. Now, just the setting for the story, you know the story of Avimelech. Avimelech has Abraham's wife, and he's warned, don't touch her. You remember this? So chapter 20 and verse 7, it says, this is God talking to Avimelech. Now then, return the man's wife, get this, for he is a Navi, He's a prophet. And we didn't know that. We didn't know that Abraham was a prophet. This is the only verse that says this. But it's interesting. He says, for he is a Navi, and so he'll pray for you, and you shall live. But if you don't return her, know that you will surely die, you and all who are yours. It's pretty easy to decide what to do in that situation, I would think, and he does it. But this is the message that I want you to understand, is that according to the text here in Genesis 20, ki navihu, because he, Abraham, is a prophet. And what we learn about the prophet here is that he's got power in the sense that if he prays for you, healing will come. Restoration will come. How is that? Because the Navi is connected to God. Right? Now, next time we come across the word, go with me to Exodus 4 and verse 10. Now, in context, this is at Horeb, by the way, when Moses meets in chapter 3 at the burning bush, the snake. He's at the burning bush. He approaches the bush. God tells him, I'm going to send you to bring forth my people from the land of Egypt. You're going to tell Pharaoh, Shalakatami, let forth my people go, send them forth. You know, and Moses comes up with a series of reasons that he shouldn't be the guy. And God says, oh, you're the guy. So here we go. Verse 10. Moses said to the Lord, to Jehovah, oh, my Lord, Adonai, I'm not eloquent, either in the past or since you've spoken to your servant. I'm slow of speech and of tongue. Jehovah said to him, who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, Jehovah? Now therefore go. Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. But he said, oh, my Lord, please send somebody else. Now I understand that. All of us who read the Bible understand this. Verse 14, then the anger of Jehovah was kindled against Moses, and he said, is there not Aaron your brother the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he's coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he'll be glad in his heart. You'll speak to him and put the words in his mouth. Moses, you'll put the words in his mouth. I don't know what that means. And I will be with your mouth and with his mouth and teach you both what to do. He will speak for you to the people, and he'll be your mouth, and you will be as God to him. And you will be as God to him. Now, that is an interesting passage. Tihyeh lo lelohim. Moses, you will be lelohim to Aaron. You're going to be for God to Aaron. A man? Stick with me. We're going to have some fun with this study. Now, in this particular passage, what we're learning is that the one in whom is the Word is Lelohim. They're not God. Don't let me confuse this, but it has something to do with the words that they speak. Associate them. Lelohim, for God. They're speaking for God. Okay? Now, what I want you to do is I want you to go to Exodus chapter 7. Now, a lot of people are very confused on this subject theologically. There's no doubt, let me tell you this, Moses is not God. There's no question about the deity of Moses. I wrote a paper titled that one time, The Deity of Moses. Never has a man spake like this, you could say about Moses. Okay, chapter 7 of Exodus. And the Lord Jehovah said to Moses, see, I have made you to Pharaoh Elohim. I'm making you, Moses, or putting you or setting you up as God to Pharaoh. Wow. And your brother Aaron's going to be your prophet, your Navi. You're going to speak all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall tell Pharaoh to let the people of Israel go out of his land. So they got this little act going on. Moses is Lelohim, and Aaron is the Navi. So it's like the God and the prophet are coming before the Pharaoh, and this is the way it's going to go down. Now, some of you that are all stiff in the collar with your theology, just relax. This is going to be exciting. Now, in chapter 11 of the book of Numbers, the context is, we're not going to read this, but I just want you to have this in there because it discusses the Navi. But in chapter 11 of Numbers, we have this situation where Moses, this is the priestly version of Moses complaining about the burden of leadership. He's got so much on his plate, he can't do it all. God says, listen, look, get me the elders together, and I'm going to take some of the spirit that's on you, and I'm going to put it on them, and then that way they can share in the burden of leadership. You remember that story? In fact, let's go there. Let's go to Numbers chapter 11, because I want to pick up on one thing. Numbers 11 and verse, I think it's 24. Let me see. Yeah. Numbers 11, 24. So Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and he gathered 70 men of the elders of the people and placed them around the tent. Jehovah came down in the cloud and spoke to him and took some of the spirit that was on him and put it on the 70 elders. And as soon as the spirit rested on them, they prophesied, but they didn't continue doing it. And 2 men remained in the camp, one named Eldad and one named Medad, and the Spirit rested on them. I use Louisiana names, pronunciation there. They were among those registered, but they had not gone out to the tent, and so they prophesied in the camp. And a young man ran and told Moses, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. And then Joshua the son of Nun, the assistant of Moses from his youth, said, My Lord Moses, stop them. And Moses said to him, Are you jealous for my sake? I wish that all Jehovah's people were prophets, that Jehovah would put his spirit on them. Now, the idea here that we get is something about a prophet, according to the biblical writers, has something that the others don't have. He's got the spirit of Jehovah on him. We'll see, maybe in him, but we'll talk about that. But this idea is, look, something happens. When the Spirit of God comes on these people, it's a different thing. Look at 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 6. This is an indication, and this is also why I can't publish my notes beforehand, because this wasn't in my notes. And the Spirit of the Lord will rush on you, and you will prophesy with them and be turned into another man. When the Spirit of God comes on a person and they're speaking and the Spirit is really on them, it's a different person altogether. They can't stop it. They will say what it is, just like it says in Deuteronomy 18, and they will speak the words that I command them. Come hell or high water, as we say, they're going to go before kings, they'll go before priests, they'll stand in the temple and criticize the cult, they'll criticize the religious leaders, and they will do it daily if God tells them to. Go to Numbers chapter 12. Numbers chapter 12 and verse 2. Now, the setting here is that Miriam and Aaron are talking about Moses because he's married a Cushite woman. And they are critical of that. And then they say, verse 2, and they said, Has Jehovah indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us as well? And Jehovah heard it. Now the man Moses, third person, was very meek, more than all the people who were on the face of the earth. See, the meekest man in all the earth wouldn't write, and he was the meekest man in all the earth. This is someone else telling us this, and I believe it. And suddenly Jehovah said to Moses and to Aaron and Miriam, "Come out, you three, to the tent of meeting." And the three of them came out. And Jehovah came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forward. And he said, "Hear my words. If there's a prophet among you, I, Jehovah, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He's faithful in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth, clearly and not in riddles. And he beholds the form, the similitude of Jehovah. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" Well now, Moses is different. God says, look, there are prophets, and I come to them in a vision and a dream and so forth. Look, that's not what he says. And see, Aaron and Miriam said, we prophesied too. He said, y'all aren't, it's different. Listen to me. Moses is a different case. Now, what are we talking about today? A prophet like Moses. Not your ordinary prophet. We're not talking about your standard run-of-the-mill prophet. Somebody who might prophesy when the Spirit, not an Eldad or a Medad. We're not talking about a Saul here. We're not talking about an Aaron or a Miriam. We're talking about someone or a group like Moses. Okay. Navi is the word we're looking at. 288 times in the Tanakh, the word Navi, translated prophet, is used. 12 times in the Pentateuch. In the Pentateuch, it's Abraham one time, Genesis 20 and verse 7, and that's the only place it occurs in Genesis. Navi. And then you get Aaron is called a prophet because he's going to be like a prophet while Moses is Le'Elohim. Le'Elohim, like God. Moses is going to play God. Aaron's going to play the prophet. And then we get Moses is called a prophet. And then we have quite a bit of material about false prophets. Deuteronomy chapter 13 is all about false prophecy, false prophets, and so forth. And Deuteronomy 18 verse 20 and following deals with prophecy that should be you shouldn't be scared of it, but this is how you know if it's real or not. So we get some things like that. We're not going to go into that today. We're focusing on something else altogether. We're talking about the prophet like Moses. Who is this? Has he come? Is it a historical figure? Maybe should we be looking and see if we know this person? Is it a series of prophets that's predicted here? Go with me to Deuteronomy chapter 34. Deuteronomy 34. And I want to pick up in verse 5. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab. This is something else Moses didn't write. You figure out why. According to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beit Peor, but no one knows the place of his burial to this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eye was undimmed and his vigor unabated. And the people of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. Then the days of weeping and mourning for Moses were ended. And you go, well, who wrote that? It starts by telling us that Moses is dead. So he's not the one that wrote it, although some hardcore fundamentalist traditionalists say that he wrote it through his tears, prophetically, because the belief that Moses wrote the 5 books in their entirety is so heavy in some people's theology that they have to say, yes, he wrote that. It's hard to imagine. This is what you usually get. I know it's hard to understand, but you just got to believe it. Some say Joshua wrote it. And that's a pretty big one. Most people say Joshua wrote it. And I know people that are listening to me now that probably believe that. But let's see, did Joshua write this? Let's keep reading. Verse 10. Let's look at verse 9. And Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses laid his hands on him. So the people of Israel obeyed him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. That's third person. If Joshua wrote this section of the text, he's writing in the third person. And what do we think about that? It just doesn't feel right, does it? It seems like someone else wrote that too. Okay, so let's now, so I'm going to tell you that Moses didn't write this and Joshua did not write this. That's my final answer. Okay, verse 10. And there has not arisen a prophet since in Israel like Moses, whom Jehovah knew face to face. None like him. For all the signs and the wonders that Jehovah sent him to do in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his servants and to all his land, and for all the mighty power and all the great deeds of terror that Moses did in the sight of all Israel. Now, if some people believe that Joshua is the prophet like Moses, and they also believe Joshua wrote this, and it just said there's not arisen a prophet like Moses. So you see, I would say my final answer is that's not it either. Now, Deuteronomy 34, 10 through 12 says that there hasn't arisen a prophet like Moses, but yet Deuteronomy 18, 15, Moses says God's going to raise up a prophet like me. And in Deuteronomy 18, 18, Jehovah says that he's going to raise up a prophet like you, like Moses. I'm going to raise up a prophet like you. So the prophet like you and the prophet like me of Deuteronomy 18 is the prophet like Moses of Deuteronomy 34. You see those three, they go together? You're going to have one. I'm going to raise him up. He's going to be like you, Moses. Deuteronomy 34, at the death of Moses, supposedly, it says, now the question is, when was this written? Again, if Moses died and within a few short years, let's say Joshua wrote it, just hypothetically. If Joshua said there hadn't arisen a prophet like Moses, and the people that he's talking to would say, well, give it a minute. He just died. It only makes sense if you're talking about the esteem of Moses as a prophet that this is written much later. Like even to now, like if I said today, there has not arisen a prophet like Moses since, everybody would go, wow. Because let's say you put him at 1400 BCE, that's 3,500 years. Now is that what you see what I'm saying? But we don't know when it was written for certain. We don't know who wrote it. It's not Moses. It's not Joshua. But it leads to questions that can only be answered by a real deep quest for the prophet like Moses. How will we identify the prophet like Moses? How's he going to talk? What's the manner, the nature of this prophet? What are the words that this prophet speaks? How are we going to identify the prophet like Moses? What is the biblical idea that is introduced to us in the book of Deuteronomy that gives us clues as to this? How will we ever know? Is it a singular figure in history or yet to come? Is it a series of figures? And that ought to get you to tune in next week. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Join me next week for a prophet like Moses.